Robinson, who's in the slot. Look in that direction on a slant. Huge hit. Ball picked off. The Volunteers on the carry make an interception. Jawan Mitchell, they call him Juju.
The discrepancy. Schuster, they were going to take a shot, but he's hit by Nelson. And Nebraska has picked up the football. Their first takeaway of the game.
Wells way down the field. It is into coverage. It is intercepted. It is over. Lamarian James has sealed the victory for Old Dominion. And fittingly, it comes on a takeaway.
Welcome back to Devy IDP Grind. I am Hollywood Titan, and I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. What's going on, man?
Oh, not much. Just enjoying President's Day. The family's home today, so.
Yep, no school. Most government places are down. Yep. It's been a couple of weeks, 2 or 3 since we had a show, but we were letting things kind of build up. And I think now actually is quite the perfect time to get started for the 2024 season. Lots going on, transfer portal, recruiting. You've got the actual season, 24 season for college football starting to get cranked up, right? Spring games, we'll touch on that. Then you've got some legal battles with the NCAA and coaches and changes and all kinds of good stuff. So, we'll just jump right into it. Tennessee, Virginia, in a huge legal battle with the NCAA over NIL. It has to do with boosters. Honestly, I don't know how the NCAA has much of a leg to stand on here. I think they're just grasping at straws and throwing stuff at the wall to see what will stick and won't stick. I don't know your thoughts on it, but it doesn't look good for them, and I think they're just trying to grasp for whatever they can right now.
I think a lot of the NIL and the transfer portal stuff is just like the horse is already out of the barn, and they, I think I don't know, like they're trying to rein it in, but they really can't, and so like. They should have been more proactive on the front end, I guess, is the best way to say it. I don't at this point, I don't really know what they can and will do, because I think, as we've talked before, if they do too much, then the big two are going to say, which I think is headed towards this anyway, is saying, as far as football is concerned, saying screw you, like we're going to do our own thing, do whatever we want. In regards to SEC and the Big Ten.
Yeah, I just don't know. I'm like you. You can't, once you have a group of tigers that you've starved and lions that you've starved for years on end, and you finally let them out to go hunt, you can't put them back in the cage once that happens. And they didn't prepare for it, right? They just kind of said, here it is, do what you will. And now you've got state legislatures involved. You've got what's likely to be, I would imagine, national or federal legislation involved. At some point, it's going to come to a head, and I just think they're on the losing end. If they were truly cared about this and wanted to be able to regulate it, I'm like you. They should have got out ahead of this before it happened. And you just, for a lack of a better term, you can't put the genie back in the bottle once it's out, right? So,
yeah.
And I'm with you. I think the Big Two, SEC, the Big Ten, and I'm sure they could get some traction from some of the others. I think they're going to wind up doing their own thing. They're going to have maybe one commissioner for both, or whoever joins them at some point. But yeah, it's going to be ugly. Which kind of brings me, and I didn't put it on here, but the whole disparage between the Power Five, and the Group of Six, right? What are we doing there? Because they're just, for a lack of a better term, pillaging those teams, right? I saw you and Choppy talking in the chat there that we have. And Chop said, well, they need to face the fact that they are like a minor league group, right? And I get that.
Well, I
but
think
maybe these smaller.
I think as time goes on, the pendulum will swing back, right? Because what you're seeing now, to some extent, is the Alabamas of the world, or Ohio States of the world. They can bring on additional kids, right, beyond the scholarship limit by giving them NIL money to pay for tuition. And so, and of course they can pay more money, all those sort of things, have more resources. So
right.
these kids are chasing that dollar sign, right? But at some point they're going to realize, hey, like, I'm not getting on the field. I'm not going to get on the field. I'm just a depth piece for them. So maybe I should stop chasing the dollar sign right now and go to where I can be played and maybe make the NFL. I don't know. Like, I feel like right now the pendulum swung so far to one side that at some point it's going to come back the other way. It's never going to come back to the way it was, but it's going to come back a little bit where some of these guys start realizing, hey, like, if I want to actually play and not just be the third string, starting defensive end for Alabama, or third string depth piece for Alabama, I want to transfer to Tulane or Liberty or wherever, so I can actually get on the field. I think that's what you got.
And a thought, yeah, and I kind of had a thought on your all's topic, like I said. These recruits, they want to go to Bama, they want to go to Ohio State, they want to go to Georgia, they want to go to Oregon, right? And there's nothing wrong with that. But maybe for the success of the smaller schools, maybe they don't recruit as hard, right? And maybe that's the wrong way to say it. Maybe they fill their rosters with the players they know they can get, right? Like some 4 stars, your 3 stars. Say, hey, look, we know you're a 5-star. If you want to come here and you want to be a part of this team, we've got a spot for you, but we're not going to hold it for you, right? So I think in my mind, if you did that, then the big groups are going to be flooded, right? Because you're going to have all these 5 stars, all these 4 stars. Maybe they sign them all. Maybe all these kids do sign somewhere. But back to your point that you just made, they're going to get tired of sitting, right? I've got Nico and I've got Merklinger and I've got so-and-so sitting in front of him at Tennessee. It's going to be 3-4 years before I can play, even with a red shirt. I want to go somewhere else. Then I think you're going to see, instead of kids going to Old Dominion, transferring to Tennessee, you're going to see them go to Tennessee and then transfer back down to maybe Old Dominions or maybe, Appalachian States, because they know the playing time is
there. And then maybe transfer back up, right? Like, so they'll transfer down to a smaller school, freaking have an amazing season, and then transfer back up, right? I think you're going to see some of that too.
Yeah, and
I mean, it would be
for those of you that.
It'd be, I don't know if it was me and Brock were talking about this. Maybe we were. But I wonder if it ever get to the point where there was like some kind of a formal agreements, right? So let's say Alabama has an agreement with UAB, right? You take these kids, they're not going to play here at Alabama, but we want you to, get them playing time, get them experience, and then after a year or two, they'll transfer to Bama. I don't know, like, make it. I don't think it'll ever happen, but like if it was more like a true minor league system, right? Where like, UAB kids went to Alabama or and ODU kids went to Virginia or Virginia Tech. I don't know, like just thinking out loud. But I think it was me and Brock were talking about that.
Yeah, I think it was. And that was just kind of my thought. Like I said, I didn't have time to really join the chat, but just thinking of that. Maybe that's how some of these smaller schools, leagues need to attack, right? Because you're going to get pillaged either way, right? if these players are that good and they dominate at your level, they're going to go up. But maybe if they start up and kind of get humbled a little bit and drop down, maybe they stay a little longer, or they decide, hey, the last time I went to Tennessee or the last time I went to Alabama, I was roadblocked for whatever. Here I can start immediately. I can play my 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is. I just think that could help a little bit for the smaller schools. Not to say that they're going to say, hey, well, you're a 5-star, we don't want you. But at the same time, we're going to build our team and we're not going to wait on you. So you make up your mind if you want to come here, we'll take you in, we'll find a way to get you. So on. So it's definitely going to be interesting. I think this is going to be the new wave. Right? First it was the transfer portal and then the NIL. Now I think playing time is going to be the next big wave for these kids. They're going to have to decide, do they want to wait or do they want to go somewhere and play immediately? So
yeah,
be interesting to see how it plays out. UCLA hired former running back Deshaun Foster as their new head coach after Chip Kelly has left.
went to
we'll
be
get
the
into
OC at
some of
Ohio
the-
State.
Yeah, which was kind of interesting for me. I just didn't see that match, but
Well, I think I don't know. Like he had been shopping himself to NFL teams, right? I just think if a college coach, like nowadays, I think a college coach, especially a head coach, you're probably not really a coach. You're more like a GM, so to speak, right? And so
right.
I just feel like, you're going to see, whereas before, I think, college guys wouldn't leave to go to the NFL because of the safety and security of the college game, right? I think they're going to be more apt to leave just because of all the BS with the NIL and the transfer portal. So the other thing, like you said, here's a head coach going to be an offensive coordinator. We saw it happen in the G5 this past week where the Georgia State head coach left to be a tight ends coach at South Carolina. And so he's essentially making the same amount of money, but the responsibilities of a tight end coach at South Carolina versus the head coach, it's quite a big difference, right? I just think that's what you're going to. I think you're going to see a lot of that where guys are like, I don't want to deal with this basically bullshit all every day, all day. I want to be a coach, not a general manager.
Yeah, I agree. I think you're going to see a ton of this, and it's something we're going to start getting into in our 5-star topic. But I think you're going to see a lot of that. If you can go somewhere and make comparable money, at least close, and have a lot less responsibility, risk.
Yeah.
Why not, right? I mean, I think the only ones are going to be the ones that truly have a dream to be a head coach, right? That maybe have never done it, because Chip Kelly has, right? He's done it in college. He's done it at the NFL, was pretty successful both places. So he kind of already knows what it's all about, right? So for him to go be the OC at Ohio State, I don't know what he's making. I don't know what the contract was, but for me, being the head coach is a much more of a headache than being a coordinator or an assistant or something like that.
Sure.
Speaking of head coaches, or should I say former head coaches, Alabama head coach or former Alabama head coach Nick Saban is expected to be part of College Game Day starting this year. I think there's some other things that he's looking at doing just besides game day. So that'll be interesting to see where he fits. I wonder if they're looking for him to be the potential replacement for Coach Corso, because he's getting up there in age, his health's not being good. I can see him up there with Fowler and Herb Street. I can see that being a pretty good fit.
Yeah, I really hadn't thought about that. I mean, I guess the one thing I've seen when he was hired was the conspiracy theory folks saying, "Oh, well, ESPN knew this, and that's the whole reason why they knew it was his last year, and that's why Alabama got put into the playoffs." I saw that kind of stuff, but yeah, I hadn't really thought about what his role would be, but that's a good call. I could see that moving him to kind of replace Corso.
Yeah, when I first saw it, they said he would have he would have a role with College Game Day along with some other. So I don't know if it's some other show. I'm sure it's other shows, but to me it was some limited capacity. They said. So I'm kind of thinking, okay, are they just trying to put him out there as much as they can as the backup plan for Corso? Because we've seen the last couple of years he's not been the Corso that we've become used to. Right? He's had some health issues, and you can even see it when he's talking and stuff like that. He's not as sharp and on point as he quite used to be. But just something that hit my head. Staying with head coaches, Texas to approve the contract extension of head coach Steve Sarkisian through the 2030 season. The extension includes $100,000 annual raises that will push Sarkisian's guaranteed salary to $10.9 million by the final year of his deal. He also gets a one-time $300,000 bonus payment and 20 hours of personal use every year on the school's private plane. He's eligible to earn more than $1.5 million in bonuses if the Longhorns win the national championship. And his original contract called for him to get paid $5.8 in 2024. And according to the Regents' agenda, the raises are a 78% overall increase in Sarkisian's guaranteed compensation. So that's a lot to take in, a lot of information, and it all boiled down to me for this. They were making sure he didn't go nowhere. That's kind of what that boiled down to me.
Yeah, I mean, Texas has resources, buddy. So I don't know why he would, right?
Right.
I mean, and there's certainly a void, right? I think with the Nick Saban retirement, that there's a void. There's a void in college football, and I think Texas's goal is to fill that void. I think Alabama, the draw to Alabama is Nick Saban, right? I think it's
Absolutely.
no secret. There's no secret that their NIL game was not necessarily up to par of the Texases of the world. And now with no Nick Saban, there's kind of a huge void there that I believe Texas is trying to position themselves to fill that void.
Yeah, well, and if you ever question what Saban's importance to college football, and more specifically Alabama, was the fact that within a few days of him announcing his retirement, Caleb Downs hit the transfer portal with a quickness. And that tells me just what he meant, right? Because that's a hard move right there if you think about it, right? You go to Alabama, you had a shot for a national championship. You had shots in the future for national championships. Everybody knows that Saban was a huge defensive back coach, and I'm sure that's probably why Downs went there. So to lose him and lose those opportunities, I mean, for him to hit the portal that quickly, that kind of told me, yeah, Saban's going to be missed a ton.
Yeah.
Speaking of safeties, Michigan safety Keon Sabb has entered the transfer portal and has already got a slew of offers, including Georgia, Tennessee, Oregon, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Penn State. I believe he was a 5-star, maybe a 4-star recruit in his class, went to Michigan, had a ton of offers back then, but with Harbaugh leaving, that opened up their 30-day window, so he took advantage of that. So it'll be interesting to see where he lands. It was interesting for me that he chose this year to enter the portal because he was set to be a starter this year. They lost some stuff in the secondary the last couple of years, so this would have been his chance to be a starter. So it'll be interesting to see, A, where he goes, and B, when he goes to wherever, what's in front of him? Is it going to be, I would have to assume if he goes to Georgia, or Colorado, right? Because they got Shiloh and Woods there at starters.
I mean, Georgia's
Is he
pretty
willing
loaded
to-
at safety too. So
Yeah, so is he willing to be a backup again, or would he rather go to a place like Tennessee where he could probably start day one?
or even
I can't
Oregon, I think
remember
would be
what-
one he could start.
Yeah, Oklahoma, I think, is pretty set at safety.
Oklahoma's
as well,
set at safety. Yeah.
Right.
Tennessee and Oregon,
So it was
if
just
he wants to play right away, seem like to be the top two.
I think so too. And we sit here and talk about the opportunities, but you have to mention the money, right? I mean, that's part of college football now. Who's going to throw the biggest money at him? And is it worth it for him to sit? So it's just crazy how the entire college football world has changed from the basic days of high school, get recruited to college, and then go to the NFL. To now, it's you're being recruited in high school and you're getting NIL deals in college and you transfer everywhere and all this stuff. It's just crazy. But Penn State is moving linebacker Abdul Carter to defensive end / edge. We've seen this movie before, right? We've seen this movie before.
People
with
keep
Penn
saying
State.
Micah Parsons, but he's not Micah Parsons. But
No, he's not.
But I remember, I guess it'd be 2 years ago now. Me, you, and Chop were doing we did player profiles, and we did one on Abdul Carter. This is when he was like right out of high school, and I remember. I feel like I know like my thoughts were, hey, this dude's a defensive end edge, but he ain't nearly big enough to play defensive end edge, right? I mean, that was kind of his best skill set. He just didn't have the size, but he certainly has the size now.
Yeah, he's you can tell he's been in the weight room and grew a little. It just kind of seems to be the MO with Penn State, right? They kind of draft these defensive end / edge linebackers and say, we'll find a spot for you. Whether that's as an edge, whether that's as an outside linebacker, whether it's even as an inside guy, depending on your skill set and size and all that stuff. And then once they get you in there, then they kind of get you in the weight room, they get you in the program, see what you're really good at and not good at, and then they adjust accordingly. I'm with you. He is no Micah Parsons. Far from it.
But he's still a good player. He's still a really good player. But,
Yes, he's a really good player. But to make that comp, I think is just that's crazy. So I'm with you on that. He's not that, but can be an impact player. It'll just be interesting to see now with the move up on the edge how he does.
Yeah, and Penn State has a need there, right? They lose Chop Robinson and Adisa Isaac. So, I think it's a need, and he had the size last year, but I think they wanted him on the field, right? He's one of their better players, and so they put him at linebacker,
right?
And
I wonder if that's the biggest factor. Not that is the need, right? Because you just mentioned they lost Chop Robinson, they lost Adisa. I don't know right off the top of my head who else they have on their roster. So maybe him moving there was the best because they have some linebackers. They have DeLuca, they have Rojas. I forget who the other youngster is. So they have some young linebackers that can make that transition for him up on the line a little easier, I think, for them as a team.
The other edge would be Danny Dennis Sutton.
Yeah. So, yeah, I could see that with the need. I could see that being why they did it.
Yeah.
Especially when you got the young linebackers that can kind of fill in on that second level. Here's one I hadn't heard of, but you put in here. Clemson defensive tackle DeMonte Capehart was arrested for unlawful possession of a firearm on school property and is currently away from the team. These kids, I don't get it with them.
Yeah, you would expect to see Georgia in front of that, right? Because
And I almost said that till I read it a second time. I was like, man, we went from driving issues to gun issues. I almost stuck my foot in my mouth right there.
I mean, he's not kicked off the
Yeah.
team, so just something to pay attention to.
Yep, never hurts to file these little nuggets away in your brain and save them. Here's one that everybody's going to love. EA Sports has dropped their first trailer for college football 2025, which is confirming the summer release of the game. I haven't seen who's on the cover. I don't know if they've announced that, but
no, but I did hear it's only on the new generation system, so I have to break down and buy a PS5.
Are you kidding me?
That's what I heard. So,
but I love my PS3.
Well, they definitely ain't making a PS3 version, but I was hopeful that they'd make a PS4 and a PS5 version, but looks like the answer is no, PS5 only. Well, from a PlayStation standpoint, I forget what the new version of Xbox is, but it's only on the new versions. It's not on not Xbox
not
One.
Xbox One. I can't remember.
Yeah.
No, it's
the
not.
Xbox One. Xbox One's like the PS4. I don't know. I can't remember the new Xbox version, but anyway, it's only gonna be on the new versions, which kind of sucks.
Yeah, that does kind of suck, but that's huge news for those of us who like to partake in gaming systems and stuff like that. So I'll definitely be entertaining the idea. I'll just have to see what the boss lady says about
the funds, right?
Yeah. Yes. I told you we're getting close, right? Kickoff of 2024 will be here before we know it. I know it's in August, but we're in the middle of February, and spring games are right around the corner. So you've got about a month and a half until these kick off. So did a little digging real quick. You've got Clemson and North Carolina State on April 6th. You've got Tennessee, Old Dominion, Florida, Ohio State, Penn State, Alabama, LSU on April the 13th. Michigan, Notre Dame, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, UNC, and Texas on April 20th. And then Nebraska, Colorado, and Oregon on April 27th. That's just some of the big names. There were some other schools that are also on these dates. I just picked out the bigger ones. There is some other dates. This is not limited to just these days. There's some other dates that schools will be scheduling. I gotta be honest, I can't go through another Colorado spring game this year. I just can't. I can't do it. I can't.
You don't want to go through the hype machine again?
Oh my gosh, I can't do that. I feel like me and you and Choppy talked about that for like 4 weeks straight.
I just saw their schedule. Guess who they play first game?
Do what?
I just saw the schedule for Colorado. Do you know who they play the very first game of the year?
So it's a non-conference game.
Non-conference game.
It's going to be televised.
But it's not an FBS team either.
Oh, it's not an FBS team.
Nope. And it wouldn't shock me, but it wouldn't shock me if they lose.
North Dakota State?
Yep, they play North
Dakota. No, they're moving up.
No, North Dakota State's not moving up.
No, they're not moving up. They changed coaches. That's right.
Yes, North Dakota State. That's who they play.
Darn it. Now I'm going to have to tune in and watch this game. I'm going to have to watch this game just to see if they lose. Oh, my God. You're killing me. Hey, Dougie. What's good, fellas? Hope y'all have a great week. You too, man. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Yeah, I just don't know if I can watch the spring game. I watched it to see, I guess, last year to see the spectacle and kind of see what players was doing what. Because last year he kind of ran through the gamut with his team, right? That's not something we normally see as far as putting some of your bigger stars and players out there to really push. kind of usually a more laid back thing, and he pushed a lot of players. Now, some of those players transferred out after the game, or after that. But I don't know if I can sit through another one. So that kind of does it for the news and notes. I kind of like, all jokes aside, I kind of like watching the spring games a little bit. I get to see, really, I kind of listen more than I watch, right? There'll be a player that comes up there and does something a time or two, and then you'll hear the announcers, or if they're interviewing coaches, and it happens, sometimes you can pick up some little tidbits. Hey, we really like this guy. He just needs to work on this, or, we can see him being this in the future. So you can, although spring games are sort of meaningless to us fans, you can pick up some little nuggets and insights for the future.
I mean, I like to watch them just to see the early enrollees, particularly defensive guys. Like last year, Anthony Hill, who I watched several high school games and did not like. But I did say, that I thought his best game was the Texas spring game. Peter Woods, Clemson, played quite a bit in the spring game. Looked like a capable, defensive lineman. So you can get some useful information out of them.
Yes, you can. So we're kind of transitioning from the recruiting, the spring games, people coming in. Quickly, we're going to look at a few that's going out, right? So the Shrine Bowl was just completed. The Senior Bowl was just completed a couple weeks ago. All the coaches and staff flooded these places, Mobile, and I forget where the Shrine Bowl was right off, but they're flooding in to see how these players tested, practiced, and ultimately played in a game. We have some MVPs. So for the Shrine Bowl, the MVP on offense was a name you may be familiar with, and that's Frank Gore Jr. from Southern Miss, running back. He had 6 carries, 87 yards, a touchdown, and it was a 49-yard shot right out of the gate.
And it was like in the first possession, right?
It was early. It was really early. He had a couple chances to add on to it and just didn't quite make it to the end zone. But he definitely impressed. You like him NFL wise?
I mean, I think someone probably, I don't know.
Take the shot on the name.
He could be a 7th round pick or undrafted free agent, I think.
Right. I think some team will take a shot on the name, right? His dad did this, which is kind of unfair to him, but somebody will take a shot. Yeah. The defensive MVP, if I could talk, is Tulane quarterback Jarius Moore. Had 1 tackle. It was a solo tackle, but he made the big play, the interception in PVU that he ran back for a pretty good ways. Almost scoring a touchdown, I believe, if I remember correctly. And he just kind of ran out of gas at the end, but huge play by him. Not sure where he's going to really go in the draft. I would kind of say late round undrafted would be my guess, 6, 7 at the earliest. I think that position has just gotten so deep that unless you truly are a Chauncey Gardner or a Devin Witherspoon or somebody like that, it's just so deep it's hard to go early. So, and then the Senior Bowl. Excuse me, I can't talk today for some reason. The offensive MVP was quarterback Spencer Rattler of North Carolina, 4 for 4, 65 yards, had the touchdown. I've seen a lot of Rattler from Oklahoma to South Carolina. I think he's a decent quarterback. I don't think he's a star, but I think he's a capable quarterback. I think if you got him in the right situation, I think he could be a starter, but I just don't see him being an elite upper echelon talent.
Yeah, somebody's going to take a chance on him, right, in the draft. I mean, that's for sure. But yeah, I agree with you. You know, he's a backup level quarterback.
Yep. And then the defensive MVP comes from Georgia. Their safety, Tyke Smith, he had 3 PBUs. Didn't make any tackles or any other plays, but the 3 PBUs, when they put him in coverage, he stepped up big time. So I'm sure that was something they wanted to see out of him, and he provided that. So, you know, it shows his athleticism, his ability to read and track the ball, and then get in there and make the play. So that was your defensive MVP for the Senior Bowl. Before we get to our 5-star topic, we have some league openings. Now, these are not listener leagues, as we have currently got those filled. We got those taken care of and out of the way. But for those of you who have listened to us here at Devy IDP Grind, you know our buddy Choppin runs several leagues, and he has a few openings in some campus to Canton IDP leagues. I think he's got 2 leagues that he has openings in. And then also we have an IDP only league, which I know you've heard us talk about. We have a couple openings there that we need to fill fairly quickly because we draft in that league before the NFL draft. So
it's an
we're
NFL
kind of up
only
against
league.
it already.
Yeah, it's NFL only.
Yes,
NFL only, IDP only. You know, the rosters are super deep. I want to say like the rosters are like 55 or something like that. Oh, IDP
that
only.
sounds right, like 60-20, I think.
But then like 20 like taxi slots. So yeah, this is by far the deepest IDP league that I know about. You know, you're not really picking anybody up on waivers. And like Hollywood said, we draft before the NFL draft. So we draft in March. It's after the combine, but before the NFL draft. So yeah, the drafting before the NFL draft is probably the biggest draw for me for the league. I'm not a big NFL fantasy guy.
Me too.
But the fact that we get to draft before the NFL draft, I like that, and that's what attracted me to the league. The dues, I think, are 55.
And I think that's been one of the things that has attracted everybody with that. Yeah, it's 55, and I think that's the biggest draw for all the owners in the league is that we draft before the NFL draft, right? So you kind of got to know your stuff. But there is some good, even though the waiver wires are kind of limited. I mean, you can find a player here and there occasionally. Yeah. And I know that's not a big draw, but we do a lot of trading.
Yeah. It's pretty active on trading.
So, and the owners, like I said, all the owners in this league are great. Tripp's in it, Chop's in it, me and Justice is in it.
Kyle.
Doc, Kyle. There's so many of us. It's a really fun league. So if you like that kind of early, I've heard about regular fantasy leagues, offensive only. They do that some, right? And I was like, man, that'd be interesting. And when this league presented itself and the guy said, hey, I want to do the draft before the NFL draft, I was like, I'm in. Just put me in. I mean, but yeah, if you're interested, please reach out to Justice or myself or even Chop. If you're interested in his campus to Canton leagues, I think me and you are in both of those. I'm pretty sure. I know he has several leagues, so I don't know. He may have another league that he needs. Just feel free to reach out to any of us 3, and we can get you started, get you set up. But the IDP only league, NFL only league, if you're interested in that, please reach out soon so we can get that squared away before our draft gets here. Our 5-star topic. So we picked, what we're doing is we're picking a conference or maybe a couple conferences. I think we just picked one, right, this week.
Yes, the American Athletic.
So we're picking one conference per week, time permitting, and we're going to go through quick coaching changes and quick player changes, right? Like the key parts of it. So I'll do the coaching changes. Justice is going to chime in with the player um, leavings, comings, and goings. So we will run through these, not too fast, but we'll run through these and cover the American Athletic Conference. Um, trying to keep y'all informed because with all the coaching changes, and now you've got this transfer portal where players are coming and going. It's hard to kind of keep track of. So me and Justice thought it might be a good idea to kind of note some of the bigger names, the ones that are really affecting us in IDP Devy League. So we'll get started. Excuse me. The Army Black Knights. As of right now, there was no coaching changes at the top or on defense.
Yeah, which is not shocking with the schools, and not a lot of player movement either, right? I mean, they don't participate. Right. They don't participate in the portal as far as acquiring players from the portal. At least to the best of my knowledge, they don't do that. Certainly, they can lose some. They can lose some through the portal. They lost linebacker Tanoa Latuli. He is transferring to San Diego State. Other than that, probably from a guy that I think probably or may have been rostered in some leagues, linebacker Leo Lowen. He is out of eligibility. He was their leading tackler last year with 75 total tackles. Probably the biggest thing to note is they lose 8 of their top 10 tacklers. The only 2 returnees in that top 10 was their third leading tackler, Caleb Fortner, a linebacker. He had 55 tackles last season. And then defensive back, Max DiDomenico, and he had 47 total tackles last season. So, they lose quite a bit on defense that they're going to have to replace.
Which kind of stinks, right? For them, but it kind of stinks in IDP Devy if you had some of those players. But, and I know this is Army we're talking about, but still, when you lose that many, that's that many spots for new players to arise and step up, right? So I figure there'll be at least 1 or 2. I don't know who, but there'll be 1 or 2 to step up and have pretty good seasons that we weren't expecting.
Absolutely.
Next is the Charlotte 49ers. Kind of the same with the coaching staff. No changes at the top, none on defense.
But they do lose players. They lose their top 2 linebackers. Linebacker Demetrius Knight, their leading tackler, is off to South Carolina. Linebacker Nakai Hill Green, their second leading tackler, is off to UCF. Demetrius Knight had 89 tackles, and Nakai Hill Green had 71 tackles last season. They lose edge Darrell Johnson to the portal. Not sure where he's going yet. He came over from, I believe it was Liberty. They lose a guy who was in, I think, he was either in the Senior Bowl or the Shrine Bowl. I don't remember which one. Ayabi Okianoma. He is an edge. He is out of eligibility. He's someone that was rostered in a few leagues last year. Man, he's like the definition of talent, but just like his head's not on right. I think he started at Michigan and some other schools, and he was a 5-star recruit. And I remember watching him play, a couple games in Charlotte last year, and he's clearly talented, but he just could not, he just stupid penalty after stupid penalty, hitting people out of bounds, just dumb, stupid mistakes that are just, it's easy to see how he ended up at Charlotte. I just don't. maybe someone takes a chance on him as a UDFA, but like the NFL is not going to put up with his antics, no matter how talented he's not that talented to kind of pass off his antics, so to speak. So, who do they have coming in? They bring in edge DeAndre Martin coming over from South Carolina, linebacker Xavier Simmons from Missouri, and then they bring in two safeties, Derek Edwards from Louisville and Trevion McGee from Iowa State. So, I mean, I think from a fantasy perspective, you're going to want to look and see, linebacker who maybe, who kind of, who replaces Demetrius Knight and Nakai Hill-Green. Their top returning linebacker is Prince Bima, who had 44 tackles last season. So another guy I think we talked about last year who does return also is edge Demon Clowney, who had 31 total tackles last year. I don't see his sacks off the top of my head. He had a pressure rate of 9.5% and 2.5 sacks. So, that's maybe a name to kind of file away on a watch list, if you will.
Yeah, them losing Demetrius Knight and Darrell Johnson and Nakai Hill, that's going to be some blows for them right there. A lot of production that they've got to try and replace. At safety, I kind of like the Trevion McGee that transferred in from Iowa State. I think he was just kind of roadblocked at Iowa State with TJ Tampa, and I forget the other kid's name that was real good at safety. Can't remember his name, but and they've got another kid that's young too. So I think that was just him wanting to get some more playing time. So I like that for him. I like that for Charlotte. That's a good get for them. East Carolina Pirates is next, and here's our first coaching change, right? So the new coach coming in is Damon Magazoo. He was a former safeties coach at UNLV. I like this for East Carolina because traditionally they've always had really tough defenses, right? Gritty, make you work for it. And I think him coming over is going to solidify that back in because I thought at some points last year, that's kind of where they got hurt, right? They could hold their own up front and at that second level at times, and then they were getting beat deep or they were getting beat at that third level. So getting him to come in, I think, will definitely help improve that a lot.
Well, in addition to the new safety coach, they're losing some folks in that defensive backfield. They lose cornerback Antoine Jackson. Antoine Jackson, I talked about him last season on the Future Freshman podcast. He was the big fish, small pond. He was the highest rated recruit that East Carolina's ever gotten, and he's leaving. He is going to UCF. They also lose linebacker Ra Dealworth, who came over from North Carolina, didn't do anything at East Carolina, and now he's off to Troy. Their leading tackler last season, defensive back Julius Wood, he is out of eligibility, so he was gone. He had 87 total tackles last year. And then their third leading tackler, linebacker BJ Davis, is also out of eligibility. He had 57 tackles last season. Who's returning, or who's coming in, I guess? Defensive lineman Jaden McKenzie, coming over from Ohio State. Defensive lineman Raheem Craig, coming over from Louisville. And linebacker Damian Wilson, coming over from Missouri. And they do return their second leading tackler from last year, Mike Edwards III, a linebacker who had 58 total tackles last year. I guess of all those people, I'm kind of excited to see, probably Jaden McKenzie, see what he can do at East Carolina, come over from Ohio State. We know how good that defensive line room is at Ohio State, so I'm interested kind of see what he can do, in a G5 school.
Yeah, definitely would like to see how he does there. Will be interesting. So yeah, it looks like they've got like a excuse me. Looks like they've got like a sort of a complete haul, rebuild going here. So be interesting to see how that plays out. But yeah,
they were pretty active in the
Rod
portal
Dilworth leaving.
on
I
offense.
heard something like you said, Jackson being their highest recruit.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they're going to look completely different from what we are used to seeing, right? From them personnel coaches. So I think it's going to be different here for them. Sorry. Up next is Florida Atlantic, and I was checking here to make sure I had my thing right. So leaving is their secondary coach, Corey Bell, who's leaving to go to Mississippi State. As of right now, replacing him, I wanted to make sure I was looking at this right. They've got Derek Gibson as their safeties coach and Roosevelt Majid Jr. Derek Gibson as their safeties coach, and they've got Brandon Harris, who's their cornerbacks coach, but he's also their co-defensive coordinator. So I kind of wonder if that secondary position is just not going to be his. They're going to let him kind of fill that role and then let Derek Gibson kind of help him in the secondary. I've not seen anywhere that they've really replaced him, but that's kind of, for me, that's kind of what it's looking like right now.
Yeah. All right. Player personnel, who is leaving? They lose defensive back Jerron Morris. He is out of eligibility. He was their second leading tackler. It's probably the biggest loss on the defensive side of the ball. Who's coming in? They have safety Philip Dunman coming over from Indiana. Defensive lineman Prince James Boyd coming over from Purdue. And linebacker Kyler Lang coming over from Buffalo. Their leading tackler from last season does return, and that's linebacker Jackson Ambush, who led them with 82 tackles for the season. So not too many changes for Florida Atlantic as far as personnel goes.
Right. And that's a good thing, I guess, to not have many changeovers or much turnover. Memphis. The Memphis Tigers, they're next. And so far, they're the one that's had the most coaching changeovers, right? So coming in is Jordan Hankins to be the new defensive coordinator. He was their linebackers coach formerly. So maybe coming in, he's being promoted, if you will. Then you've got Lou Esposito. Yeah. Lou Esposito, the defensive line coach. And now he's coming over from Western Michigan, where he was their defensive coordinator. And then leaving, you've got Matt Barnes, who was the defensive coordinator. He left to go to Mississippi State to coach their safeties. And then Kyle Pope is leaving, who was their defensive line coach. He's leaving to go to Georgia Tech to coach their defensive line. So it looked like they lost a couple good ones, right, with Barnes and Pope, but they've refilled, I think, or not refilled, but replaced with Esposito. I think that was a good get for them because Western Michigan usually has pretty good defensive line play. So I like that for him. Yeah. And then promoting within Hankins up.
Yeah, Marshawn Nealon, is a name you'll hear through the draft process. It's where he came from, Western Michigan. So
yep.
All right. As far as personnel goes, they lose safety Cameron Smith going over to TCU. Linebacker Jeffrey Canton-Arcu out of eligibility. Defensive back Simeon Blair out of eligibility. That was Kenton Arku was their number 2 tackler. Simeon Blair was their number 3 tackler. And then they also lose their best defensive lineman, Jalen Allen, who's out of eligibility. Who's coming in? They bring in defensive lineman Patrick Lucas over from Indiana. A safety that I'm familiar with, Taj Rael, coming from Old Dominion. Safety Jordan Greer coming from Indiana. And linebacker Javante Mackey coming over from Arkansas State. Mackey's probably one that has me the most excited. As a freshman last year at Arkansas State, he had 84 total tackles. So he could probably, they do return their leading tackler, though, Chandler Martin, who's only a sophomore. He had 94 total tackles. So they got to be feeling good about linebacker, right? I'm assuming Mackey's going to kind of take over for Jeffrey Kenton Arku and be the starter opposite Chandler Martin.
Yeah, you'll have to tell me more about Taj Rael from Old Dominion, the safety. So, but yeah, as far as Mackey, I thought that was a great pickup for them, right? Didn't play much as a freshman for Arkansas State, and he's a Tennessee boy, right? He come from Whitehaven High School. I thought he was a really good player. I was kind of shocked that he didn't receive more interest coming out of high school because he's a really good player. But didn't play much as a freshman, and then last year, like you said, it looked like he had the starting role or a major role, and he did really well in it. 84 tackles, 52 solos, 7 TFLs, 2 sacks, a couple other fumble recoveries and pass deflections. So I think that's a really huge get for Memphis and what they want to do. So I like that.
Yeah, I mean, Taj, he's probably, a physical safety. He was a good tackler. Be kind of interesting to see how Memphis uses him.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see where we're at here. So up next is the Navy midshipman, kind of the same as with Army. Not a lot of turnover coaching wise, not a lot of turnover player wise, unless they're off to fulfill their duties, serving the country or whatever. But they had no coaching changes at the top, none on defense. They did have a couple players here who are leaving, and I'll let you have that.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's the military academies. You don't see a lot there, but they do lose edge Jacob Busick transferring to UCLA, and someone you may be familiar with, linebacker Will Harbor, is out of eligibility. He was their second leading tackler this past year. And as far as coming in, that they don't bring anyone in the portal, but their leading tackler from last season, linebacker Colin Ramos, does return. He led them last season with 94 total tackles.
Yeah, Will Harbor, that's going to hurt. He was kind of their motor, right? Their heart and soul, their do everything guy. So losing him is definitely going to hurt. Up next, we have North Texas Mean Green, and I just love their name, and I love their uniforms because they embrace the green. they embrace the green, man. It's great, but they've had some good players come from there, right? You got 2 in this draft that's coming up in Grayson and Gabriel Murphy that transferred to UCLA and now are entering the draft. So, who was the linebacker last year, a year before that was so good that everybody wanted it?
Oh man, I can't think of his name.
100 tackle guy, just
yeah.
I can't either. He was just a downhill go getter. So they've produced some pretty good players.
From a fantasy perspective, absolutely.
Over the last few years. So yeah. So again, no coaching changes, none on defense.
So they lose their second leading tackler, safety Patrick Smith, going over to ODU. which is definitely a position of need for Old Dominion. Old Dominion, they start 3 safeties essentially, and all 3 of them left in the portal. So it was definitely a need. So great to see they can get someone that can tackle, because definitely a need for Old Dominion. They also lose safety Logan Wilson, who's in the portal. Not sure where he's going yet. They lose one of their best edges in Mazine Richards, who is out of eligibility. But they're bringing quite a bit in. They bring in edge Jake Shipley over from Oregon, safety B.J. Allen from Texas, safety Ashim Young from Ole Miss, linebacker J.J. John Luis from Iowa State, and another Texas safety in Xavier Bryce. They also return their top leading tackler and linebacker Jordan Brown, who led them last season with 77 tackles. So, yeah, I mean, you can see, like, they needed some defensive backs, and they brought him in. You know, Ashim Young is someone I think, like, we expected more things of out of Ole Miss. So maybe, you know, dropping down to the G5 level, we can kind of see some more production from him.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. And I know this is not their conference, but I've seen the name mentioned on this list a couple times, and that's Ole Miss, right? They've got a lot of changes coming in Ole Miss, coming in, leaving out. So I know we're off topic as far as conference, but I think that's a team that's going to be really interesting to watch and see how they come out because of all the changes. Up next is the Rice Owls. No coaching changes at the top or on defense to speak of. Looks like they have a player or two who's leaving and coming in.
Yeah, not anything earth shattering. They do lose defensive tackle DeBraylon Carroll. He's going over to Texas Tech. I'm sure he's nothing but really a depth piece there for Texas Tech. And they do bring in edge Michael Daly over from BYU. Other than that, they pretty much return, you know, most of their starters. They return their top 5 tacklers. Their leading tackler was Myron Morrison, a linebacker who led them with 68 tackles. But certainly there really isn't any Rice guys you're looking to roster from a CFF IDP perspective, or even from an NFL perspective either. So not a whole lot there at Rice.
Yeah, and they're losing their best player too to the draft. So, and Luke McCaffrey, he's out.
Yeah, the best offensive player. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Up next will be the South Florida Bulls. Out is their secondary coach, George Barlow. So he's leaving to go to Louisiana to take over as the lead secondary coach. And coming in is going to be DeMarcus Van Dyke. He's going to take over at cornerback, and that's the position he held at Florida International, where he was before, cornerbacks coach. So a change in their secondary they weren't happy with, or he's moving on, but they've got that spot filled and looking to improve there. And South Florida, I won't say great or elite or top notch, but they've had some decent defensive backs over the last few years. Maybe not NFL quality, but for IDP Devy, they've produced some decent options in the secondary.
Yeah, and speaking of secondary, the top player they lose is safety Will Jones, also going to Old Dominion. Again, like I said earlier, we're not covering Old Dominion today, but Old Dominion lost a lot in the defensive backfield. They also lose edge Lloyd Summerall, going over to California, and defensive back Daquan Evans, who was their second leading tackler, is out of eligibility. They do bring in some help in the defensive backfield, and maybe Hollywood knows a little bit about this first guy, cornerback Deshaun Rucker, coming over from Tennessee, and safety Kawan Banks coming from South Carolina. They also returned their leading tackler last year, Jalen Schuler, linebacker, who had 97 total tackles last season.
Yeah, as for Rucker, he just never really could crack the starting lineup, right? I mean, he wasn't a big guy. He's 6 foot, 190. Played kind of sparingly the last couple years. And 2021 was his biggest year, right? He played all 12 games, but he was nothing more than a special teamer. I mean, he played 24 career games and has 14 career tackles. So nothing that really hurt us, even with all the losses we had at defensive back. Losing him wasn't a major hit. And I think that's what people don't quite realize about some of these schools, such as Tennessee, for example. Yeah, we had 8 or 9 players from a single position, safety, corner, leave, but either they weren't starting quality, a couple of them, or we had a couple that ran out of eligibility. So it was just the sheer volume that kind of hurt us. But from him, I mean, I wish him the best. Maybe a change of scenery will spark something, but not someone that I'm really interested in for IDP Devy, at least not now.
All right.
Let's see here. Oh, almost lost where I was at. So Temple Owls are next. Another team that always seems to have that player or two, right? That's really good and then kind of transfers somewhere else. But for IDP, they usually have 1 or 2 players that's really good. Leighton Jordan comes to mind. I forget who the other kid was a couple years
Jordan
ago.
McGee.
That was there and transferred. Yeah. So they somehow Temple does pull in some talent. They may not be able to keep them, but yeah. No changes coaching wise, but they do have some player changes you're going to discuss here.
Yeah, I mean, the defense is hit really hard. So they lose their leading tackler, linebacker, Jordan McGee. He is out of eligibility. He is off to the NFL, and I just looked. He will be at the Combine. They lose their second leading tackler, Tywan Francis, out of eligibility. Their third leading tackler, Yvonne Rigby, out of eligibility. Their fourth leading tackler, Jacob Hollins, out of eligibility. And then they also lose linebacker Leighton Jordan out of eligibility. 8 of their top 9 tacklers are gone between either out of eligibility or transferring out. So they are losing a ton on that defense. Who are they bringing in? Linebacker Torin Wright coming over from NC State and cornerback Jalen Lewis coming over from Arkansas. Their leading returning tackler is safety Elijah Darreville, who had 40 tackles for him last season. After that, you're looking at linebacker Corey Yeoman, 35 tackles, linebacker Trey Thomas, 30 tackles, and linebacker DeJuan Black, 29 tackles. So they are losing a ton on defense this coming year.
Wow. Yeah, that's when you lose that many of your top tacklers. That's hard for any team to try to make up the following year. I don't care how good you are. That's tough, right? When you're losing that many, 8 of the top 9, that's whew.
They only return 30% of their tackles and like shade under 30 or 38% of their snaps. That's a lot.
Man, that's rough. That is rough.
As far as like if you rank them, like all the FBS, they're 131st. So that means only 2 teams are worse than them in terms of what's returning.
Yeah. Yep. Oof, that's rough. Well, hopefully they recruited well and hopefully they were able to possibly hit the portal as well, right? There's some kids from Division 2 and Division 3 that can move up and stuff like that. Maybe a lateral move, just kids wanting to come closer home or whatever, but they definitely have their work cut out for them. Up next is the Tulane Green Wave. And this might be, of all the schools in the American Athletic Conference, this might be the school with the most important and biggest change as far as coaching. And maybe that'll trickle down to the players too. So I'm really interested in this. We know how good Tulane has been, right, under the last few years. So head coach Willie Fritz is out. He left to take over the Houston head coaching job after 8 seasons. So he was 54-47 in his time there, but he was 23-4 with an AAC championship and a win over the USC in the Cotton Bowl the past 2 seasons. So he had that team dialed in, competing. They're the underdog. They're the true underdog, right? When you're talking about the playoffs that's coming, even this year, and they kind of pushed for it, but they were the underdog. So that's a lot of production that you're going to be losing. And I think they hit a home run here. They're bringing in John Summerall, who was at Troy. And in his past 2 seasons, guess what? He was 23-4, and he won 2 Sun Belt championships. So your head guy is your key guy, right? I mean, he's responsible for everything. He's, from coaching staff to players to whatever. And to follow somebody that had that much success, but you have that same success, I kind of feel like this is going to be a seamless transition, right? As long as he can get the players and coaches to buy in, I think Tulane keeps on rocking here. I just think they're not going to miss a beat here. Will there be some changes? Will they look different? Absolutely they will. But I think if you're, a lot of times when coaches leave, or even if you fire them, that next guy up as a replacement, that's a hard job to fill, right? So I think they did good there. So you've got also with Willie Fritz leaving, you've got Shael Wood, their defensive coordinator. He left to go to Houston for the same position. Gerald Chapman, their defensive line coach, he left to go to Florida to coach the same position. And then John Christian Young, their defensive backs coach, he also followed Fritz to Houston to coach defensive backs. So 3 of the 4 followed Fritz. The other one went to Florida. Replacing them, you're going to have Greg Gasparotto, defensive coordinator. He's coming over from Troy. Taylor Polk, the inside linebackers coach. He's coming from Troy. Landius Wilkerson, defensive line. He's coming over from South Alabama, where he coached the defensive line. And then you've got Bam Hardman, defensive line coach, who is coming over from Troy too. So a lot of times when you see these big name coaches or successful coaches, when they move from one school to another, you typically see a lot following, right? Just as far as coordinators and assistants. Yeah. It's just a typical thing that you see. And I think that's why I feel so confident that Tulane's going to be all right. Right? I just don't see them falling flat on their face because of the coaching change. Now they may back down a year or so. They may not be 11-2 or whatever it is they was. They may be a 9-3 or 10-2 team for a couple of years, but I don't see that being a drop. I think they're just going to keep on going. And I think in the conference they're in, I think they have an advantage, right? So I like this for Tulane, and I expect things to keep on churning. It will, and we kind of know what we've seen from those guys at Troy, right? Because they were successful there too. So I think it's just different players and getting them to buy in is the issue.
Yeah, they were one of the best defenses in G5 last year. Troy was. So as far as players going, So they lose edge Devin Deal going over to TCU. Defensive lineman Keith Cooper following the coach to Houston. Linebacker Corey Platt going to Houston. Safety Kentrell Webb going to Houston. And safety DJ Douglas going to Florida. So as you can see, most of the players leaving, they're following their old coaches. Who they bring in? They bring in safety Jalen Geiger coming over from Kentucky. And so safety Ladarius Webb Jr. coming from Oklahoma State. They do return their top 3 leading tacklers. Jesus Machado, linebacker, was their leading tackler with 98 tackles. Hollywood favorite Tyler Grubbs, linebacker, was their second leading tackler. He returns with 85 tackles. And safety Bailey Despaney returns, and he had 67 tackles last season. So, I mean, I think you're right that Tulane as a whole there might be a little bit of a dip, but it's not going to be a huge dip. They were very active in the portal, especially on offense. They brought in, Ty Thompson, quarterback, Mario Williams, receiver, and then I want to say a receiver from Alabama too, right? Let me see if I can figure it out. Oh gosh,
I can't think of his name.
I can't either. But they brought in two of the 2 Power 5 receivers coming over there. Now they did lose, Chris Brazell over to Tennessee, but yeah, I mean, I think you're right that 10 or 9 win seasons on tap. They're still going to be a good team. And like you said, Troy was a good team in the Sun Belt, and so I think it's not going to be much of a dip, if a dip at all, for Tulane.
Yeah, and I mean, just look at what they had in Troy, right? They've got 2 NFL edge prospects in Richard Jubinier and Javon Solomon, right?
Yeah.
I think you can see that kind of same thing here at Tulane. Now, who exactly will that be? I don't know. Their linebackers were pretty good at Troy, so I think Tyler Grubbs is going to continue to do well here. I think you may see for Tulane a little bit more of a change on offense, right? Which I think could be the dip, because I think defensively with Summerall coming over with his staff, I think he's got some key pieces, right? You got your defensive coordinator, which is key. You've got your inside linebackers is key. And then you've got your defensive line coach, which is key. You've brought in Wilkerson to help with the defensive line. So I like it. I just don't think they're going to drop off very much. And for IDP purposes, I think you're going to see more of the same, if not a little better, from those Tulane guys. Next up is Tulsa Golden Hurricanes. No coaching changes to speak of. Looks like there's a few player changes.
Yeah. We just got done talking about Temple and how bad their returning defensive line looked, or defensive as a whole looked. Well, Tulsa's worse. Tulsa is ranked dead last in returning defense from last season, returning production. They lose a ton. They lose their leading tackler, Kendaran Ray. He's out of eligibility. They lose their second leading tackler, Julian Simmon. He is off to Connecticut. Linebacker Dorian Hopkins is off to UTEP. Safety Jace Oliver off to TCU. Defensive lineman Everett Rogers off to Houston. Defensive lineman Jaden Simon off to Connecticut. Defensive end edge Ben Kopinski is out of eligibility. They lose 10 of their top 11 tacklers. They're only, look at who's coming in. They do return their third leading tackler, Dane Hodge, who he was a safety, had 56 tackles last season. Who are they bringing in? Linebacker Gavin Potter, coming over from Arkansas State. Linebacker Zach Marchicelli coming from TCU, linebacker Chris Thompson Jr. from USC. This next one surprised me because last I'd heard this name, the kid played wide receiver. But I guess he's transitioned over to defensive back, and that's safety Zion Steptoe at Purdue. Funny thing, I had actually rostered him in a couple college leagues as a receiver when he was coming in, but looked like he's transitioned to defensive back. And edge Miles Jackson coming over from Indiana. So, yeah, a lot of changes, and defense could be an issue next season for Tulsa.
Yeah, it looks like they're going to have their work cut out for them to try to get this thing turned around for sure. Up next is the UAB Blazers. So they're losing Ernest Hill, their defensive coordinator, who's off to ULM, and they're bringing in CJ Cox to coach their safeties, who was a former cornerbacks coach at Kent State. I don't like losing the defensive coordinator, but if it's not working, then it has to be made. And I'm not exactly sure who's filling in for him or taking over. I don't think I've seen that, but maybe they promote within there.
As far as players go, they're losing linebacker Jackson Bratton to North Alabama, linebacker Jamarcus Jones to Louisiana Tech, safety and their leading tackler, Keandre Swoops, he's out of eligibility. They lose their top two tacklers in Swoops and Bratton. Who's coming in? And the edge, they bring Ezra Odenjor over from Georgia Tech, defensive lineman Ladarius Cox from Indiana, and linebacker Octavius Brothers from Purdue. But unlike, Tulsa, they seem to return, quite a bit of their defense. So not in quite a bad a shape in terms of returning production.
Right. And we're going to finish it up with the USTA Roadrunners. And they are bringing in Galen Scott to coach their linebackers. And he was formerly an inside linebackers coach for Louisiana. So right now that's their only defensive change that they're making.
They do lose some players. Probably the biggest one is edge Trey Moore going over to Texas. They also lose defensive back Ken Robinson, who was their leading tackler. He is out of eligibility. Linebacker Jamal Ligon, their second leading tackler, is out of eligibility. And a favorite of ours, safety Rashad Wisdom, is also out of eligibility. They lose 4 of their top 7 tacklers. As far as who's returning, their third leading tackler, Jamal Ligon, linebacker who had 62 tackles last season. And then they bring in linebacker Brevin Randall coming over from Louisiana Tech. He had 74 tackles last season for Louisiana Tech. They also bring in linebacker Ian Jackson coming over from Alabama, and safety Sinkay Williams coming over from Austin Peay. A lot of that coaching staff, the new coaching staff is coming over from Austin Peay. So, especially on the offensive side, we saw a lot of Austin Peay players coming over. But Trey Moore is a huge loss for them. Huge loss.
Yeah, and I was trying to quickly look here. Man, they're just to lose him and not lose him to the draft that hurts, right? Because that was someone that you would hope that you could keep on your staff because he's so good. I believe he went to Texas, so trying to look and see maybe who the next guy, who that next guy for them might be. I think it's this guy right here that I looked at once upon a time.
I mean, from a sacks perspective,
So they've got some youngsters.
From a sacks perspective, it's the top guy returning is Nick Booker Brow, 2.5 sacks.
Yeah. Because they're losing. They're losing Moore, who had 14. They're losing Matterson, who had 5. Robinson had 4. So they're losing a ton of pass rush.
Well, I take that back. Jamori Robinson maybe is their next guy, 4.5 sacks.
Yeah. So either way, I mean, they're losing a lot. So they're going to have somebody step up there. But to lose Moore was huge. But that's a huge get for Texas, right? I mean,
absolutely.
There was some interest from Tennessee and some other schools. So for Texas to land him, that was huge.
Yep.
But it looks like Austin P, or, bringing in a player there, that'll help. Ian Jackson is kind of intriguing and interesting. Coming over from Alabama, your thoughts on him? Because he's not a bad player. I just think he never really got the opportunity.
I don't really know much about him. And then I need to recant my Austin P comment because all those coaches didn't go to UTSA. They all went to UTEP. They all went to UTEP is where all the Austin P coaches went to. So I got my UT schools mixed up. UTEP is where all a lot of the Austin P kids and all the coaches went to, not UTSA.
Yeah, but the Ian Jackson, I think is that's interesting. I think he was kind of buried on the depth chart, right? Because they are so deep and they are so talented. I just don't think he ever really. I don't want to say he didn't get the opportunity. I just don't think he was able to crack in there, right? So, I mean, he's a sophomore. He'll be a junior this year. Didn't really have any stats at all in 2022. Just didn't play a ton of football for them.
No, he was a 4-star.
And then you look at last year,
number 24 linebacker out of high school.
Yeah, he was highly recruited, 6'1", 225 roughly. And then, last year, nothing either. So I think he kind of seen he needed to change his scenery. So hopefully it works out for him.
Yeah.
And if it does, that's a big get for them, though.
Yep.
So that does it for our American Athletic Conference coaching, or we'll just call them changes, coaching changes, player changes. Next week we're doing
Conference USA.
Sounds good. That'll be a good one to do.
We'll talk about UTEP and all the Austin P players.
You're right. You was just a week ahead. That's all.
Exactly.
But we thank you for listening and tuning in. Thank you, Dougie, for the kind words. Always feel free to stop by, drop questions, whatever you have for us. We want to thank MFL for sponsoring our listener leagues on the Canton side, and we want to thank Fantrax for sponsoring us on the campus side. A lot of work. Are we still kind of wishy on Fantrax and their issues? I think we are, but
I mean, they're not gonna. Yeah, I mean, it's the same as it's gonna be, right? They're not. To my knowledge, they aren't.
Yeah.
Their stat provider can't provide tackles, so it is what it is. At this point, we're used to it, right? I mean, we've dealt with it for.
I just find that
a couple seasons now, so.
Yeah, I just find it odd that your stat provider can't provide the main stat tackles. It's just kind of weird to me, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, To me, the weirdest thing is that I'm able to do it myself using a free resource, and they're paying and they can't get it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it is what it is. I guess we'll have to deal with it. So, but thank Choppy too for you guys taking the time to put all that effort in to keep our leagues going. Also, thank you to Trophy Smack. They sponsor us with our listener league hardware for our winners. Here's one that recently came in. If I could get over here. There we go. That's one of the rings that they put up for us.
You get to send another one to me, and you get to keep one yourself this year.
Yeah. You get another one. I get one this year. So hopefully we can repeat that success next year.
I need two more. I got 3. Out of the way I need 2 more to fill the hand up. So.
Hey, we don't need to hear about your Tom Brady path here, okay? We don't want to hear that. But we thank them for sponsoring us. They do a wonderful job with these rings, and we thank them so much for sending them to us. So I'll be getting those in the mail to everyone here within the next week or so as we get ready for this year. Want to shout out to Devy .com. They're an energy drink. It's all natural, no sugars, nothing like that. Go check them out. Be sure to use the promo code IDP Nation and get a discount off of your purchases. But I've tried their product. It kind of looks like flavored water, but man, it's so good, and it really gives you a lot of energy. So go check them out. And it's not the sugary stuff you buy in the Kansas store that's bad for you. So go check them out. And then, of course, be sure to check out the G5 Hive tonight with Justice and I can't never remember
Luke.
His name.
Luke.
So sorry, Luke. But Justice and Luke will be doing that tonight, I think around 10-ish. So be sure to tune in there.
Probably closer to 10-15, but yeah.
They could, but they'll enjoy the support. So go harass Justice over there on offense. But that does it this week. We'll be back with Conference USA next week. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Apple, Spotify, Google, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Podbean, all those good things. Follow us on @Devy IDP Grind. Go over to YouTube. Give us a subscription and a follow there. We're starting to get that going in the right direction. And all this just helps us grow bigger and be able to do more things. You can follow me @Hollywood Titan. You can follow Justice @Justice_2318. And 2024 is here, and can't wait to get started. And we will see you next week.